Hi, my name is Carla Edmonds, and I am the Renal Unit Manager for Ochsner LSU Health in Shreveport, Louisiana. And this is our PowerPoint presentation for Facing the Freeze, which was our emergency response for the winter storm of 2021. So just to give a little backstory as to what was going on at this time, we were coming out of our third COVID surge when this winter storm hit, and the first 24 or 48 hours of this were pretty uneventful. Staff were still able to get back and forth to the hospital. Not a lot was going on. We could still, or we were still running dialysis as usual, and there were really no issues at this point. It was going into about that 48-hour mark where the temperatures were still well below freezing and had been for a few days. And that night there was a sleet and ice mixture that fell on top of the snow that had already accumulated on the ground. So this just created a very bad situation for really the entire region. So for us, especially, like I said, we were able to run dialysis the first 48 hours without any issue. But once that ice mixture fell and the temperatures were still well below freezing, that's when we started hearing of, businesses losing power, and then also that water mains around the city were starting to burst, which was pretty concerning to us. So it wasn't too much longer after that that we did lose access to water in the hospital. And so we made it through about the first 24 hours without any water, which is a pretty bad situation to have inside of the hospital. Going into day two, we were kind of expecting to have water back. It was starting to warm up a little bit. We just kind of were under the impression that we would have water probably by the end of the day, but which we did not. So once we got back on the third day and we still had no water, at that point, a state of emergency had been, or our entire area was under a state of emergency, and the hospital had already made requests for potable water trucks to come in. Of course, they were having a very difficult time trying to get here just because of the conditions of the road. But this many days without dialysis, we knew we were going to have to do something, and something pretty quickly for our patients. The more critical patients had already been converted over to CRT, and we're running on that, but they were still needing like more volume and better or more quicker electrolyte correction. So once the trucks did arrive on site, at the time the dialysis unit was on the 5th floor. So the water was here. We just needed to get access to it, basically. We did have a DI system and an external booster pump was running with that system. It was coming off the domestic water was coming into the booster pump. So the booster pump was already receiving pressurized water to push through the DI system. And our idea was to get as much water up here as we could, barrels of water, and to see if the booster pump would then, instead of having pressurized water fed to it, pull water from the barrels and then push it through the DI system. So while we were trying to find ways to get the water up to the 5th floor, our biomed was kind of reconfiguring the connections on that booster pump. So we did have some medical grade barrels that we were able to get access to. We did get fill those up with water from the potable trucks and get them up to the 5th floor. By that time, our biomed had the booster pump ready, so we put the hose in and turned the booster pump on and the DI system to see if anything was going to happen. And the pressure gauges on the DI system started to go up. The resistivity meter also began to go up as the DI system had more and more water coming into it. So after those pressure gauges sort of stabilized, no alarms were going off. So we went ahead and checked the water for our usual tests for dialysis, which they were all clear. So with that information, our medical director gave us the green light to turn on the first dialysis machine. So we turned on that machine, put it through a rinse cycle. It was able to pass through that rinse cycle. It had no interruptions, no water alarms. So we then put it through a chemical disinfect, which it went through just fine. We went back and checked it for chlorine and everything that we're supposed to check it for. And he again told us to go ahead and prepare that machine for a patient. We had 3 patients that night that really desperately needed hemodialysis. So our goal was to get at least 3 machines up running, if not just one. If we could get 3, we knew we would be doing really, really well. Got the first machine up, prepared for a patient. So we went ahead and tried machines in station 2 and station 3, put them through all the same rinse cycles that we had with the first machine. They passed, no alarms with them, no alarms with the DI system. So we went ahead and set them up too. So that very first night of running on this temporary sort of emergency system, we were able to run 3 of our more critical patients that were really needing dialysis at that point. So the second day came back, went ahead and tried to open 6 machines. So we opened up 6 patient stations, did all the same tests and rinse cycles and chemical disinfects with those machines. They all came up with no alarms. The DI system had great pressure on all the gauges. The resistivity meter was still where it needed to be. So we went ahead and were able to run all the patients that needed dialysis that day. We did end up using this same system for almost 2 weeks, right at 2 weeks. We ran this system until all the water lines were restored throughout the city. And after all the boil advisories were lifted, it's when we switched back to our regular system. But we did have a nurse assigned to barrel duty every day. And their job was to make sure the barrel stayed full of water and not overflow or anything like that. So just some acknowledgments with this. Our medical director and administrative staff were critical in making this entire process successful. They made sure we had the supplies that we needed. We got donations from a local water vendor that provided us with a lot of 5-gallon jugs that we were able to keep refilled. Once the potable trucks were able to connect to the main hospital line, we were able to have access to running water intermittently throughout the day. So anytime the water came back on, we would fill up all the bottles that we had, all the barrels were refilled, and then we would run off that until we could start refilling those again. So this was our emergency action plan, and I hope you enjoyed the presentation. Thanks.